Andiamo. start whenever you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the September 12th meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. Thanks for your patience. We had a little delay with our tour this morning. We're getting started a little bit late, about a 1:15 start time. But we will. And I think, given the number of people that we have, we'd like to begin with introductions, please. And maybe start in the back with Siobhan. Go through the room.
Yeah, Siobhan Haynes, Water Master, Oregon Water Research Department, Mary Becker.
It's me, John Philbin, agricultural resources with Jacksonville Water Conservation District.
Formisville Community Water Resource Conservation and Scott Jacksonville Water Conservation District. April Snell, Oregon Water Resources.
Shane McDonald, Lander Valley Irrigation District and Enterprise Irrigation District in Clarendon.
Glenn Barrett, Livestock and Water.
Harriet Sear, Deputy Director for Water Resources Department. Melissa Rash, Public Information Officer for Water Resources Department. Kim Fritz, Water Resources Department. Superintendent Community Engagement Coordinator, Water Resources.
Rick Parsons, Christopher Hall, Water Lead.
Stephanie Tidwell, Water Climate Trust. Laura Hart, Oregon Water Resources Department.
Doug Woodcock, Deputy Director of Water Resources Department.
Tom Halferty, citizen of Oregon.
Kimberly Priestley, Water Watch Oregon.
Becky Hall, Director for the Water Resources Department.
Jan Lee, Commissioner representing Northern area.
Eric Webbs, Commissioner, North Central Region.
Meg Reeves, Commissioner, West Side of Palm.
Julie Smitherman, Southwest Representative.
Woody Wolf, East Region Commissioner.
Kathy Kahara, East Side at Large.
Joe Mall, West Central.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we've got the baseball stadium minimized.
You're trying to.
Thanks. I did want to take a moment to acknowledge Ivan Gall's presence here as director. Obviously, it's been a little bit of time since he retired, but I want to congratulate him on his position and thank him for seeking this responsibility. It's a great responsibility for the state of Oregon. And he did it even though he knows exactly what he's getting into. So appreciate his experience today and that he's continuing to work on behalf of Oregonians and water resources. So I want to welcome him in this position. And again, thank Deputy Director Douglas Woodcock for the time that he served as interim. Our first agenda item, of course, is groundwater allocation rulemaking, agenda item D.
Good afternoon, Chair Quemps, members of the Commission. My name is Annette Liba, and I am the Technical Services Division Administrator for the department. I regret not being able to join you in person today. However, I think you probably are all better off that I am joining you virtually. With me for this agenda item is Justin Iverson, the Groundwater Section Manager, and Laura Hart, the Policy Analyst and Rules Coordinator. And before we get started here, I just wanted to share some additional acknowledgements. We had some key contributions from other members of the Oregon Water Resources Department, Ben Scandella and Travis Brown, who both contributed significant expertise both on data analysis, rule language, and responding to public comments. I also wanted to acknowledge the staff from the other state agencies with whom we coordinated throughout this process. We did have an interagency work group who we briefed on this rulemaking throughout the process. So I want to acknowledge and thank them for their time and contribution as well. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview on the presentation. Justin's going to give a brief background just to make sure to orient us. and then Laura will cover the rulemaking process, an overview of the general comments and responses. She will hand it back to Justin, who will share comments that are more of the technical nature as well as the department's responses. Then we will summarize the proposed rule changes that were made in response to public comment, and we'll come back with the alternatives and director's recommendation. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin.
Okay, thanks, Annette. Again, for the record, my name is Justin Iverson. I manage the groundwater section for the Water Resources Department. And as Annette mentioned, I'm just going to review a few slides that folks have seen before just to make sure that we provide the background for the rulemaking as a whole. So I want to start, as I usually do, with the objective of the rulemaking, which is to update groundwater allocation rules to be more sustainable and protective of existing water right holders, both in and out of stream, and to note that this aligns with the IWRS recommended actions 10G to strengthen water quantity permitting programs, as well as 11E to develop additional groundwater protections. And the reason we're engaging in this rulemaking is to limit additional or future overallocation, because under the current rules, statewide monitoring data has indicated that many parts of the state have groundwater levels that are declining, as well as surface waters dependent on groundwater discharge that are overallocated. Signs of this overallocation are seen throughout the state and include drying up of wells or lowered water levels that increase pumping costs, reduced stream flows, curtailment of rights that people have invested in, as well as in some places, water quality deterioration. We found that fixing, if you will, overallocation is a long-term and expensive task, and this rulemaking is really aimed at not making issues worse and preventing the number of times we need to curtail in the future. So again, the rulemaking is based in statute in ORS 537621, which has what we term colloquially the 4-part test for determining whether to allocate additional groundwater resources. And we're really focused on just one of the 4 parts, which is water is available, and defining what that means. So broad overview before we get into it. Again, the current rules essentially say that a requested groundwater source is available if it's not overallocated, which means we can allocate up to the full annual recharge volume, including any groundwater that's flowing through an aquifer system to discharge as tributary to surface water bodies. Also, through our Division 9 rules, we have some tests that help us avoid short-term and acute impacts to surface water, but they allow long-term and cumulative impacts to develop. So with the proposed rules in front of you today, we've taken a different view of how we determine if water is available, and we've said that the requested source is available only if groundwater level trends are reasonably stable, hydraulically connected surface water is available for further appropriation, and if the aquifer is physically capable of producing at the requested rate. So the draft rules, as proposed for adoption, were designed following these broad principles. We designed the rules to promote sustainable groundwater use and recognize the prior appropriation doctrine. So again, we want reasonably stable water levels to be determined and maintained as per the statutory policy. And we want to ensure that groundwater contributions to stream flow are maintained where stream flow is already fully allocated to existing water right holders, and that groundwater is dependent upon by existing senior users. We've based the changes in law or statute, science, and Oregon's groundwater data, as we'll touch on again later today. And again, we've designed these rules to only issue additional groundwater rights where information exists to confirm that water is available for further appropriation. So the last part of this background is to just reiterate the scope of the rulemaking. We've developed these rules such that they apply only to potential new permitted groundwater uses. The rules have been drafted such that they do not apply to or impact existing permit holders or exempt groundwater users, including folks that are exempt from permitting for domestic use, small livestock uses, and small single industrial and commercial uses, among others. So with that, I'll pass it over to Laura to talk about the rulemaking process we went through.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
We just don't want that feedback like that.
No audio. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, I still have the echo.
Yes.
Okay, testing 1, 2. It didn't sound like too bad of it. It is.
That sounds better.
No, I still have that. I do not. Well, if you do that.
For those of us online, it does sound much better.
This is unmuted. That's where we get the issue.
Yes.
I think you're accurate. Check. Justin, can you hear? Thumbs up or down? Thumbs up. Okay. Can folks in the room hear?
Yes.
Looking at the people in the very back. Sharon, can you hear? Okay.
And the YouTube.
We'll just- I'm checking.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all. We had some technical difficulties. We are going to resume our presentation now. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna try this again. Justin, can you advance to the next slide? Okay, great. And can the people in the back hear me? Okay, or no, louder? I need to talk a little louder. Say that again.
Theater voice.
Theater voice. Okay, all right. Because I'm facing forward, I guess. Okay. You can, some of this information we've shared with you all before, but it felt it important to really emphasize the fact that the public involvement with this rulemaking effort has been very extensive. You know, we started back in the fall of 2022 with those public outreach meetings held across the state. Were well attended, took a lot of feedback from the public, put together a report, and that report's available online. We began a Rules Advisory Committee process in April of 2023, held 8 meetings, had 2 technical information sessions as well. I think we've got some RAC members in the room here today and probably online. We'll thank them more than once, but just want to acknowledge that it was a tremendous amount of time and effort that these RAC members contributed to the rulemaking process, and we're very grateful for that. Want to acknowledge that. We've provided Groundwater Advisory Committee updates, as well as updates to you all here today, the commission. We've provided tribal updates in the form of staff-to-staff quarterly updates, as well as reaching out via letter and email correspondence to invite either consultation or coordination with us on rulemaking. And we've also offered public, outreach presentations upon request. I think of a note that attachment 2 has kind of a list of some of those outreach efforts that we have been involved with. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is, these are the affiliations of our Rules Advisory Committee members. We had 30 members, and again, very active Rules Advisory Committee, pretty diverse representation across the state and also in terms of water users. Tried to represent the various sectors as best we could. We strove for geographic diversity. We tried to, balance with gender and racial diversity to the extent that we could do that as well. We had representatives from 2 of Oregon's tribes. And again, very engaged RAC. All the meetings were hybrid. We probably had as many people in the room as we did attending virtually, and close to 100% for a lot of our meetings, I'd say. So just very engaged, a huge commitment on their part. Okay, if we can go to the next one. Okay. Let's see, are we answering? We're not doing questions till the end, right? I see a hand raised. Somebody monitoring the chat, hopefully. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so, we noticed our proposed rulemaking on March 1st. We originally noticed it for a 90-day period, so a pretty lengthy comment period. We extended that comment period an additional 2 weeks, so 104 days of public comment. We held public hearings across the state, including offering a hybrid option, at the Salem meeting. I think that's all I have on that one, so we can go ahead and go to the next one. Okay. Then we wanted to acknowledge here our efforts at tribal coordination and consultation. In response to our public notice, we did get some input from some of the tribes, noting that the notice of proposed rulemaking was somewhat deficient because we didn't really explain all our efforts to engage with the tribes, and there are reasons for that. It has to do with the way you fill out the form when you submit it with the Secretary of State, but we're committed to including more description of our efforts to coordinate and or consult with tribes in future rulemaking. So that's just a process change we're going to make for future rulemaking efforts. And then we had some, I think 2 of the 3 tribes mentioned that they would appreciate it if we engaged with them earlier on in the process. So again, we're kind of learning as we're going here. We will be updating and formalizing our coordination and consultation process, and there's some things that are happening that's going to help inform that effort, including our director and the other recently appointed natural resource directors. They're going to do this listening tour and meet with tribes and get some input on how we can do better. And then also we're waiting for guidance from the recently formed task force on tribal consultation, which will hopefully help us just update and formalize our process so that we can do better in terms of engagement with tribes during rulemaking. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, and then the other piece to highlight here is I mentioned that we've been doing regular check-ins with the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Back at their last meeting, I think it was, I want to say it was during public comment. I want to say it was the March meeting. Justin's kind of nodding. He can feel free to correct me if I don't have the right dates, but so they formulated a statement which is included in its entirety in the staff report, so you can read it word for word. We dropped it into that staff report, but they noted some things about the rulemaking that they appreciated. I don't need to repeat all this, but and they did have a recommendation that we work to coordinate on managing interstate aquifers. So that was kind of their one, recommendation on as far as next steps. And then just generally, they were supportive of the rulemaking effort. So we wanted to make a note of that, given that their role is to advise the commission. And so this is advice coming from the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Go to the next slide. Okay, so now I've got kind of a series of slides. I'm going to talk generally about the input that we received in response to the notice, the public comments that we got, which is kind of centered around some themes. And then I'm going to hand it back to Justin, who's going to dive deeper into some more specific areas, focusing more on the science underlying our rulemaking. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of a snapshot of what we got from folks. We received over 1,400 comments. We had over 1,300 individuals who commented. So some folks commented more than once. Maybe they attended a hearing and then also sent something in writing, or maybe they attended multiple hearings. So we corrected for that to give you a count of how many people weighed in on this rulemaking. We received comments from residents of 33 of Oregon's counties, so pretty, statewide, right? As well as residents of Arizona, Washington, and California. And then 3 of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes also submitted comments to us. generally speaking, the majority of these comments recognized the need for us to do more to manage groundwater sustainably. So in line with our objectives, recognizing the importance of that objective. And many of those comments were supportive of our scientific approach for updating the rules. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we did get comments around several general themes, and I'm going to go through some of these. Trying to remember which attachment this is. So let's see, attachment 4 is where we have all the written and oral comments. Attachment 6 is where we got some form letter comments. So some folks sent in comments, maybe in response to an e-blast they got from an organization or something like that. So we compiled those for you. And then attachment 7 is where we have the summary of the comments as well as our responses. So these next few slides really track from attachment 7. And so the first general theme around which we received comments were comments concerning the adequacy of our current tools. Some folks agreed with us that our tools were not adequate for protecting the resource, for addressing groundwater level declines and addressing impacts to hydraulically connected surface waters and senior water rights holders. So there were folks that agreed that more needed to be done to address those issues. And then there were other folks that said, well, you have tools in place, and they pointed to things like critical groundwater areas, serious water management areas, the ability to withdraw from further appropriation, various tools that the department has to address concerns relating to groundwater level declines. And our response essentially was, we agreed with the former group that our current tools were not adequate because we were seeing those impacts. We are still seeing those impacts. And those other management tools are really more remedial. There's something we implement when, we're kind of in trouble, right? And we're trying to address a problem and remediate the situation rather than prevent, and be more sustainable and protective of existing water rights holders. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the next theme around which we received a lot of comments was the sort of the scope of our rulemaking approach. So there were people who commented that we, instead of focusing on a statewide, rules that apply across the state, that we should develop more targeted or basin level rules. And some of those commenters noted that not all basins were experiencing groundwater level declines. And we also got comments on the other side saying, yes, the statewide approach is the appropriate approach. It's equitable. And they noted, as did our team as well, that the analyses that we were using were are robust to that basin to basin variability. So they're not sensitive to basin by basin differences. So, so I think I've stated some of the response here. The statewide approach is the most cost effective and protective. The science does rely, we do have data from the various basins and counties. So we are using data from the various basins. And then also the other important point is, or two important points, that, the applications are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, looking at site, it's implementation that's occurring at a site-specific level. So that part of groundwater allocation hasn't changed. And then also our basin program rules may be defined under our proposed definition for reasonably stable groundwater levels. Basin program rules may develop their own definition of that term, and Justin's going to go into that shortly. So next slide. Okay. So another general theme focused, we got several comments about potential impacts to municipalities. We got some municipalities that noted that they had experienced economic impacts from past allocation, largely from having to pursue alternative sources of water. We got some comments questioning the compatibility of our rules with statewide comprehensive planning goals. And then also some comments expressing concern about the availability of water to meet future needs, such as additional housing and economic growth. And our response to that, well, first, the rules are designed to protect existing users, and municipalities are existing users. So in that sense, municipalities benefit from greater certainty about future water availability to the extent that we're talking about their existing water rights. Regarding comprehensive planning goals, the department is not required to evaluate proposed rules for consistency with comp plans, but we will and do evaluate applications for consistency with plans. So it's in the implementation where that consistency comes into play. And then also, and we got comments from members of the public on this last point as well, that there are feasible water supply alternatives available, albeit some may come at a cost, but there are some alternatives. This slide, we've, I think, shared these alternatives with you previously, but these are some of the other options for meeting water supply needs. Okay, next slide. Okay. All right, and so this, I think this is probably the last theme that I'm going to talk about before I hand it back to Justin. We got several comments about the potential impacts that our rule changes might have on existing water rights holders. And there was some merit to this comment. And so we have made some changes in response to the public comments that we received on this theme. And some of the changes that we made had to do with reinstating some of the definitions that we had proposed to revise, because some of those definitions also had the potential to impact existing water rights holders, because they rested, in a definition section within Division 8, within Division 9. And so if it was a definition that we did not need to support our new proposed definitions, then essentially we just reverted them back. And so are no longer proposing changes to those definitions. So aquifer, declined excessively, overdraw, substantial and undue interference, those we're no longer proposing to change. We had also originally proposed a new definition for timely and effective, but because, and that was at the request of the RAC actually, because it was a term that was used but not defined in Division 9, but it's used in a section that does pertain to existing water rights holders. So we are no longer proposing a definition for that term. We also added some clarifying language to just make it really clear how we're going to evaluate hydraulic connection, potential for substantial interference with respect to existing water rights holders versus new groundwater allocation. We moved some criteria. So that's the second to the last bullet there. And Justin's going to talk more about that. So we did some language. We're proposing some additional language revisions in Division 300 regarding water is available that Justin's going to talk about. And then in Division 410, just sort of along this same theme, the scope of the rulemaking does not extend to existing water rights holders. It also does not extend exempt uses. So we made a reversion back in that division as well to make sure that our new proposed language does not impact exempt uses. Okay, So next, I think, yeah, okay, so here I've got a handful of slides here that actually show the language. This is, we can walk through it a little bit, but this is more, because I know some people like to see the language rather than hear how it works. So, and the highlights here show new language that we're proposing in response to public comment. So this isn't language that was noticed. This is the new language. And so you'll see in subsection 3 here, and this is in Division 9, that we clarify which rule, so 0040 applies to proposed groundwater uses and the determination of potential for substantial interference. And then number 4 clarifies that 0050 and 0060 apply to existing groundwater uses. And so that's the distinction there. And then we have additional language that describe that basically, I would say grandfathers in, but carries in, you know, the prior process for evaluating hydraulic connection and determining potential for substantial interference. So basically just clarifying that that's going to happen the way it happened before our new rule proposals. So there's no changes with respect to existing water rights holders. I think we can go to the next one. Okay. So this is a revision from Division 9 as well for the definition of potential for substantial interference. And again, just describing, you know, to assess potential for substantial interference, if it's for proposed groundwater, we're going to look at Division 9 0040. And if it's for existing groundwater uses, it's going to be Division 9 0060. So just again, just clearly pointing to the rule and making that distinction between existing and future water rights. Okay, next one. Remember if there's another one. Okay. Well, there's a few, we did this in a few places. So here, so the highlight, we added that preface in the rule name. So to make this clear that this determination of hydraulic connection and potential for substantial interference applies to proposed future groundwater uses. I think we go to the next slide. I might ask you to pop back for a second. Yeah. Okay, go back. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So I don't think we included all. The main thing here is that the language we add is just clearly describing that the rules in this section apply to proposed groundwater uses. So if we can go to the next one, okay. And then this one, okay, this is Division 410. So the last section down there is the language that we reverted to make sure that the proposed language does not impact exempt uses. So that was, because we had, I think we tried to, originally we had proposed a different modification to that last sentence, but it was changing the rule language with respect to exempt uses. So just to be clear on that, we just put it back to where it was before. So, okay. So I think that's it, the rule language. We'll go to the next one, Justin. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to Justin.
Okay. So I'm
Okay,
gonna,
can you hold on a second?
Sure
So we
thing.
can make sure we can hear you.
sorry, can you hear me without any echo at this point? All right, thank you, Kathy. Okay, I'm gonna go through another set of slides similar to what Laura just did with summaries of comments followed by our general responses, but they're going to be grouped according to these two major themes or the two major changes we're proposing, a new definition for reasonably stable groundwater levels and a redefinition of the potential for substantial interference. If you're following along, I'll be summarizing the comments that are detailed in attachment 7 of the staff report. And we'll go through reasonably stable groundwater levels first, followed by the potential for substantial interference. So if you'll recall, we mentioned several times in the run-up to today that the legislative policy laid out in statute, one component of that says that reasonably stable water levels shall be determined and maintained. That's been in the statute since its inception in 1955, but has not been defined to date, and therefore it hasn't really been able to be effectively applied to date. So this first part deals with our new definition again of what is a reasonably stable groundwater level. So a couple background slides here just to make sure that I frame up where these comments are based. So please recall that we based the proposed definition on peer-reviewed science, and especially the framework for a dynamically stable range from Gleason and others, where this figure has been taken from that I've shown several times before. So recall that dynamically stable, that term recognizes that groundwater levels will fluctuate up and down in response to seasonal groundwater use. So that is here in the blue line, and each squiggle here is representing a seasonal spring high and then kind of summer fall low at the end of use. And in Oregon, this seasonal use is again in response to our precipitation patterns, which we see roughly a 10-year climate cycle of wet and dry years with a shorter duration El Nino cycle superimposed on that. But within this kind of framework of dynamically stable, the key is that each spring after the wet season, when recharge is finished, and before the dry season, when irrigation and other uses increase, we should be returning to this kind of spring high that's within this dynamically stable range shown by this blue horizontal bar. So you can contrast that with what's termed in this paper strategic aquifer depletion or managed aquifer depletion, the gold and red lines here, which are not supported by Oregon's statutes. And I'll note here and come back to it later that aquifer thickness, which can be kind of thought of as the full scale of the y-axis here, is really not pertinent with respect to the dynamically stable range, though it is relevant to the managed and strategic aquifer depletions. So we took this framework, and again, in creating a rule, we wanted to put quantitative values in that describe this dynamically stable range. We did that by conducting a statistical analysis of Oregon's available data to define these values, and we've documented that in a peer-reviewed report that we put out during the RAC process. So in short, we assessed our existing data sets. We looked at over 9,000 wells where we had water level data across the state. We narrowed that down to about 350 wells with more than 25 years of data or of water level record that that appeared to respond to Oregon's climate cycles. So we use that long record in order to encompass the decadal climate variability that we see. And then we further grouped those wells into where we had kind of concentrations of wells that showed similar long-term trends. Then we grouped those into clusters in order to limit biasing our results where we had kind of many wells in a given geographic area. So we then took that record and we said, well, we'd like our definition to encompass at least 90% of the wells that show this response to climate variability. And so using that threshold, that's how we came up with a definition that says that reasonably stable exists if the decline rate is less than about 0.5 foot a year, averaged over 5 to 20 years into the past. and if that total decline is 25 feet or less, representing kind of the extent of this blue bar in the figure. So we feel like that statewide assessment provides appropriate statewide limits. Our sensitivity analyses didn't show that there were significant regional differences from one part of the state to the other with the data available. So with that background, we'll get into a number of the comments. And again, we've kind of grouped them together. And the first group we've titled the scientific basis. So we received a number of comments that appreciated and noted that our scientific approach was robust and appropriate. We also received a set of comments that requested other criteria be included. And some examples of that are take into account aquifer thickness or take into account the needs of groundwater dependent ecosystems and how those respond to variations in water level. So our general response is that our goal is really to maintain the function and character of the resource by maintaining water levels within this dynamically stable range. And while seasonal water level fluctuations might be, relatively large in some places, the spring or annual high water level should always return to within that dynamically stable range in order for us to consider that water level trend sustainable or the use of that groundwater sustainable. So as noted earlier, dynamically stable range is independent of aquifer thickness because we're really looking at that spring high coming up to its historical range. And while some groundwater dependent ecosystems, as pointed out in the comments, can respond to water level fluctuations less than 25 feet. And also while we looked at existing water wells across the state and found that about 14,000 existing wells might still be impacted by water level fluctuations less than 25 feet. We believe the proposed thresholds strike the best balance of many concerns. So we haven't proposed any changes to those quantitative thresholds. So second group of comments focused on consideration of artificial recharge and the methodology for doing that. So as you'll recall, in defining really just one component, the reference level from which we measure what we consider the magnitude test, the 25 feet total decline from highest known, we recognize that highest known might be impacted by human-caused recharge and wanted to take account for that. Really, when we were looking at how the test might play out against existing hydrographs, we noted some really straightforward examples. So aquifer storage and recovery, for example, where a developer of an ASR project is injecting water in the winter, that will raise water levels in the vicinity of that injection well significantly. And similarly to if a reservoir is built in the vicinity of wells for which we have a water level record, that can raise water levels above what they've been in the past. So we wanted to account for that. And that's pretty straightforward, and I don't think that these comments on the methodology are really intended to address that. So another thing that we recognize is that as Oregon developed surface water distribution canals across the state, those canals were historically unlined and would leak water into the aquifer system, and that is a source of artificial recharge. That is less straightforward to calculate because we don't often have water level records that existed before development of the canal. So canal development might have begun in the early 1900s in some areas, and water level records might have started in the 50s. So we have this gap, and we need to figure out the best way to account for that. So we've started gathering information specifically about canal development impacts in the Deschutes Basin, where a lot of this conversation is focused. We plan to develop a methodology for assessing canal impacts with input from both the Groundwater Advisory Committee and a panel of technical experts And we do intend to document the methodology as well as the results for various areas, excuse me, of the state. So we will address that, but we haven't addressed that in the rules specifically. Another set of comments regarding artificial recharge were requests that we take artificial recharge into account, or this human caused impact into account, in both the magnitude and the rate tests. And we really don't think that is necessary. So again, for what we've termed the magnitude test, we really aren't changing the magnitude threshold with this consideration of human caused impacts. The magnitude is still 25 feet. What we are addressing is that the reference level is stated to be set at the highest known water level. And in the case of an artificial recharge bumping up that highest known water level, there's no other provision for ever bringing it down. So it's kind of a ratchet, if you will, that anytime the water level goes up, that resets the highest known water level unless this provision allows us to set it lower. And in contrast, the rate test is really a self-correcting test. So it's based on today's water level compared to water levels taken between 5 and 20 years ago. And if all those tests are greater than roughly half a foot a year, that's when that rate test is triggered as being too much for reasonably stable water levels to be found. If that test is truly failed just because of removing artificial recharge, then eventually, if there was some previous equilibrium and that equilibrium is reached in the future, then that test is going to evolve with that changing trend. And as soon as that trend flattens out to a new equilibrium, it passed the test, and then water will continue to be available according to this reasonably stable water level test, as long as the magnitude hasn't been exceeded. And so with that, we think that it's best to allow the data to lead us to the conclusion, as opposed to trying to assess the impacts of artificial recharge on that rate test. All right. Next group of comments on the reasonably stable groundwater levels piece was the discussion that there would be an added financial burden, or comments stating there'd be an added financial burden on new applicants. So if you'll recall, we've set a minimum amount of data in order to apply this test of 5 years. And in the majority of cases, looking back at our past record and our general feel for how we've evaluated water rights in the past and what data was available, we expect that groundwater level data is going to be already available from nearby wells in a number of cases. Also, currently, applicants can already provide additional data to support an application, and the new rules don't shift that burden. In other cases, water levels might be presumed stable if we find that groundwater hasn't been extracted in the vicinity of the proposed new use. But we acknowledge that we expect some cases where existing extraction exists, where we have water rights or exempt use development, that especially if it began some number of decades ago before we required water level monitoring and reporting, we might not have data to show what the status of water level trends in those areas. And there, we will require more data. The rules do require the applicant to provide it. The one thing we'll note is that if existing development is occurring or has occurred, that means that there's existing wells in the area, and ideally those applicants can work with existing well owners to gather data from existing wells, as opposed to having to drill their own well. So lastly, I guess I'll say, or we'll add, that we also have been requiring for some years now, and intend to continue requiring, any new right to measure and report water levels on an ongoing basis for the life of the permit. And so from the perspective of that requirement that's been added to recent permits for several years already and into the future, that adds a maximum of 5 additional years of data collection on that existing burden, if you want to call it that, for use of the state's groundwater resource. Okay, and last group here of comments is around the provision that allows the definition of reasonably stable groundwater levels to be superseded by basin program rules. So, excuse me, one second. Okay, so the department received several suggestions for various criteria that the various commenters wished would be included as provisions for developing the superseding definition. And they really, they were a wide-ranging set of proposals. And essentially in response, we did revise the criteria, and we kind of collapsed down to saying that the criteria were our statutory authority, both within the Basin Program rule statutes, as well as within the Groundwater Act of 1955, kind of link those together as considerations that needed to be incorporated. And we also noted that the commission's rules regarding groundwater allocation, or the commission's policies, should be taken into account as well. And so this is kind of in the same format as Laura was showing before, where we've highlighted changes to the noticed version of the rules. Within this Division 8 definition for reasonably stable groundwater levels, we did 2 things. First of all, up at the top, we wanted to make sure that we noted what the goal was of this definition in general. Why are we defining reasonably stable groundwater levels? And it's really so that we can use existing data, observed trends to assess whether water levels will remain within a range that's consistent with sustaining the function and character of the reservoir. So that's put in the top level and kind of defines the goals that any superseding definition needs to address. And then down where we specifically say that the quantitative tests can be superseded. So the quantitative tests are the half a foot a year decline over 5 to 20 years and no more than 25 feet as statewide criteria. If those quantitative criteria are to be reassessed, then again, we want that to meet the statutory requirements of the Commission's authority in ORS 536, which is the Basin Program rules, as well as 537, 505 through 992, which is the Groundwater Act of 1955. And lastly, OAR 690, 410, which is the policies of the Commission. So with that, I want to take a pause and see if there are any questions or comments on the reasonably stable water level sections before I move on to potential for substantial interference.
No, I don't see any.
Okay, sounds good. And I'm happy to answer questions at the end as well. Okay, so next set of slides, again, a focus on the kind of second major change that we're proposing to how we allocate groundwater, and that has to do with how hydraulic connection and the potential for substantial interference play into the assessment. So going to start again with a couple just summary reminder slides. First one, again, to remind how this hydraulic connection and PSI test work. So first of all, hydraulic connection is a scientific finding, and that is prerequisite for a kind of policy finding of the potential for substantial interference. We've based these findings on the scientific literature on generally accepted hydrogeologic principles, and we've specifically called out this USGS circular by Barlow and Leake in 2012, which summarizes the best available science over the previous 7 decades regarding stream flow depletion by wells and understanding and managing the effects of groundwater pumping on stream flow. So just a quick quote as a summary of this whole 100+ page circular is, if surface waters are hydraulically connected to a pumped aquifer, then the volume of depletion of those surface waters will equal the volume pumped from that aquifer. And therefore, given the prior appropriation doctrine, as well as the understanding that we've fully or over allocated many surface water bodies in our state that rely on groundwater discharge to support stream flow, the rules are organized such that we will find that water is available for a proposed new groundwater use only if downstream surface water that's dependent on that groundwater flow is sufficient to meet existing uses. And so the assessment of hydraulic connection or the process is going to remain the same. So the rules don't change how we evaluate hydraulic connection today. We perform a detailed site-specific evaluation. We look at existing data and information. We don't presume hydraulic connection. We make these application by application assessments. Again, we're using site-specific and local data to inform those assessments. And again, the process isn't going to be changed by the proposed rules. So folks that are familiar with our current hydraulic connection findings to date should expect to see similar findings if the proposed rules are adopted. So the comments that we received around the hydraulic connection and PSI rule changes really all boil down to thresholds. So you'll recall that our current rules set some thresholds that protect surface waters from short-term acute impacts while allowing longer-term and cumulative impacts to build over time. And we have removed those limitations such that if a new water right over the life of that water right will impact surface waters, we're going to acknowledge that as the potential for substantial interference with that surface water and the users that already exist on those surface waters. And we're going to take those surface waters and assess them for whether they can handle additional flow, or excuse me, additional allocation. So a couple, I guess, more specific responses that I've bulleted here. So first of all, the question at this stage of evaluation in Division 9 is really a question of whether the groundwater is tributary to surface water, not necessarily how much. So hydraulic connection is really a conceptualization of that flow system, not a specific quantity determination. And the determination for hydraulic connection and PSI, they meet the statutory authority and criteria that the determination be based on the application of generally accepted hydrogeologic principles to a specific proposed use. I guess I'll also note that we did receive some comments that the process and the scientific approach was robust, and appreciate that acknowledgement from some of the commenters. So continuing in the response, again, if we find hydraulic connection and PSI via the proposed new Division 9 rules, then the determination that water is available really relies on surface water availability. And that includes looking at the water availability reporting system for the hydraulically connected streams, which is a statistical assessment of surface water availability at a sub-basin scale. So the thresholds, as they are really built into that WAR system. The rules go on to talk about taking into account water master measurements and observations, as well as previous withdrawals of some waters in statute or rule for other defined purposes. As Laura noted earlier, these criteria were originally listed in Division 8, but we have made a change from the noticed version and moved these criteria directly into the definition of water is available in Division 300. And again, that was based on several public comments to address the potential for the Division 8 definition to affect more than just allocation. So we've taken these criteria and taken them out of a definition of substantial or undue interference, which can apply to other portions of the statute, including critical area designations, and we've moved them specifically underneath the water is available definition. And so again, with the highlighted text being new language that's listed in attachment 9 of the staff report, that's changed from the noticed version listed in attachment 3. We've taken these criteria, capital A through capital F, and have put them again directly into the definition of water is available. One last thing I will say on that is you'll recall that one of the original goals of our rulemaking was to keep intact the existing connections of other rules that relied on the finding of potential for substantial interference. So that's specifically or most importantly, the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Program, as well as the fish persistence considerations in Division 33. So by moving these water or these considerations for PSI into the definition of water is available, we did evaluate that. We've coordinated closely in evaluating this issue with both the Water Rights Division as well as legal counsel, and we believe that the rules as changed do keep intact the nexus with the Deschutes mitigation program. So I put up here some details. The Deschutes mitigation language from Division 505 is here, that if a groundwater permit applicant satisfies the mitigation program, then notwithstanding these divisions, the proposed use is deemed to be an appropriation that does not have PSI. And you'll notice that Division 300 is not in here specifically. However, 310 is noted here, and that is really the rule set that guides the water rights section and how they evaluate new applications. And because Division 310 includes the 4-part test from statute, which is one of those, what we're proposing to change today, water is available, but also allowable uses under the basin program rules, as well as other rules of the commission, then that mitigation program consideration is still intact and will operate as it does today with the new rules if they're adopted. Okay. So I'm gonna hand it back to Laura now to re-summarize all the proposed rule changes that we've made in response to comments, but happy to answer any questions if any came up during that segment.
Thank you, Justin.
I think we have to do the adjustment thing again. Okay. Okay.
Chair Smitherman, can we take a small recess here? Maybe we can deal with our technical issues, and also I think some folks need a break as well. Agreed. It's since the chair is not here. Would Chair Smitherman like to officially allow us to do that?
Yes,
Or maybe
officially.
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Vice Chair?
He definitely in charge.
Justin, can you hear me? Okay. No, it's still there. Sorry, that's really long and. Is this on? Justin, can you hear me? Okay. Can you make it to just this one? Justin, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Just a thumbs up or down, because I think we've got you down at the
Ah.
moment. Okay.
Thumbs up.
Joe, can you read the back? Okay,
Where was that coming out of? Speaker room?
I have no idea. I can't hear it. I can only hear me.
Okay, we're going through that.
Okay.
Discretionary use tax.
From.
Yeah. So it was Hold that outside.
Use the wireless.
I was asking if he's been there, is he held up to sit down on it, so I went down to do it. That was just put the record. But it's pretty close. Everybody else.
All right, are we ready to test this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Justin's our guinea pig.
Sure.
Yep, you need to test.
Justin can hear us. Now, why can't we hear Justin? So Justin, I am gonna ask you to talk now since,
Okay, no
I
problem. I
can't
can
hear you
talk.
right now.
I can keep on talking.
We still can't hear you, so.
Yeah.
Testing. Justin can still hear us. We still cannot hear him.
Test,
Oh,
test, test. Justin, you want to take over the testing?
I can keep testing.
Because right now, he's out front, and into this, we need to turn the whole system.
If we don't turn off the whole system, but just turn off the mics? Does that work?
Oh, we can do that.
Thank you all for your patience. Promise I will. There we go. Are all the mics on? So that's, okay, all right, let's go ahead and shut that system down. I don't want to hear myself more than I have to. I know. Okay, let's get these meeting. You want to use the owls, you said? Yes. Is that on here that I need to make that change? There,
So that's
it's gonna be here. Well, these see both are, so do we just need to turn them on and up? Is that what it is?
Everything you have to.
Testing?
Testing. Testing. Can you all hear us? We cannot hear you now. There you are.
I
Yes.
can hear you.
Great.
All right.
Where do you hear?
Is this as loud as this gets? Annette, speak one more time, please.
Yeah, I can talk for a bit. How's that? Does it work?
Okay, yeah.
I think that's it.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna ask folks in the room to sit down, only because I can't hear anything overall of this joyful discussion. When I think we're close. All right. Justin, can you speak one more time for us, please?
Yeah, how does that sound? Can you hear me okay?
Okay, we're not getting an echo. I wish you were louder, but we can't hear you.
Okay,
Okay, now we're talking.
better.
Oh, it might be that.
And we are at a point where we're going to turn it back to Laura. Just FYI.
So commissioners, your mics are off. This one does work. So, it will be a really fun exercise of how quickly you can pass the mic. Or you can alternately speak up. Okay.
This would be like the jury springer.
The chair give you the mic to her.
Because we don't have one here, so. Okay,
The owls will take it up.
the owls will pick me up, all right.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me online?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me in the room if I talk like this? Okay. All right, okay, so I want to do a quick recap of what we're proposing as far as our rulemaking. So Justin, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just sort of a reminder that in response to comments, there's kind of two areas where we're making some additional revisions. And so dealing with the factors that go along with that supersedence issue with the basin program rules that Justin already went over with the reasonably stable groundwater level definition. And then also the reverting some of the definitions and fixing some of the language to clarify that our rulemaking does not pertain to existing water rights holders. So I just wanted to give that little reminder. And I've got a series of tables, so, that'll reflect these, revisions, as well as we did have some other, rule language, changes proposed, that, want to just quickly remind you about as well. So, so in Division 8, as far as definitions go, in the notice, we proposed a new definition for annual high water level. We'd like to retain that proposed definition. That definition supports, our proposed definition for reasonably stable groundwater levels. For aquifer, declined excessively, overdraw, and substantial or undue interference. Those were the definitions that we had originally proposed to revise, but because they have potential impacts or could potentially impact existing water rights holders, we're no longer proposing revisions to those. We want to keep the current rule language for those. And then reasonably stable groundwater levels, that's a new definition. And as Justin explained, we have some proposed revisions to that new definition that we would like you to consider. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, so in Division 9, we have some definitions in here. In the original notice, we proposed to repeal or delete the definition for commission and director, because those terms we've proposing a revision to the term department, which includes those terms, so we don't need all three. Effective and timely manner, that was a new definition that we had proposed to add, but because that defines a term in a rule that pertains to existing water rights holders, we're no longer proposing that new definition. Hydraulic connection or hydraulic interconnection. I think I'm gonna show, I don't remember if I showed this or not, but we had originally proposed to add hydraulic interconnection, but we actually did get a public comment that pointed out we don't use interconnection anywhere, so we don't need that term. So that particular term, we're gonna drop the latter part. It's just gonna be hydraulic connection. Potential for substantial interference, that's a new term. And Justin explained the revisions that we're proposing to make to that new term. And then proposed groundwater use and stream flow depletion, those are new terms that we proposed in the original notice. We would like to adopt those new definitions. They support, I think it's the potential for substantial interference evaluation. Okay. We can go to the next table.
Yeah, sounds good, Laura. Just real quick, I missed this in the review, but just to be clear, potential for substantial interference is a revised term, not a new term. So
okay,
want to make sure I clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Division 9, in addition to the definitions, there are different rules in there that we proposed revisions to, and we're proposing additional revisions to, this is where we need to clarify which rules pertain to existing water rights holders versus future groundwater allocation. So that, let's see, Division 9, 0010, 0040, and 0060, those are the ones that we need to, add that further clarification and just make it clear which pertains to existing, which pertains to future. The general policy 0030, that one we propose to delete because we have incorporated that in 0010. And then let's see, 0050, we don't propose any revisions, but I wanted to note typo. And I think that's on the next slide. Is that right? Okay, so go ahead and go to the next slide for me. It's on the next one. Okay, so what we noticed here is for this particular rule, there's a typo in your meeting materials in attachments 8 and 9, which this typo isn't in the notice, so we noticed it correctly. But in your attachments, there was, that yellow highlight there, that last track changes was not captured in your meeting material. So we just wanted to be transparent about that and let you know that that was not reflected in the meeting materials, but it was noticed correctly. So we did depict the track changes in the notice. Okay. Okay. And then as far as divisions 300 and 410, let's see, we proposed a revision to the preamble. We don't have any changes in response to public comment for that. Water is available. We do have proposed revisions to that definition in Division 300 as Justin outlined for us earlier. And then 410, we have proposed revisions in that division to address that issue to make sure that the new rules don't impact exempt uses. Okay. And then in addition to that, we always have these what I like to call housekeeping changes, which don't really require rulemaking because they're considered minor, but so to the extent that we're able to, we've converted groundwater, 2 words to groundwater. If there's some spelling errors in there, sometimes there's some errant hyphens that we catch, so we clean that up as best we can. We update the statutory authority and the statutes implemented. And then there's always some formatting we need to do, adjust the numbers and the outlines and so forth. So we'll be doing that as well. Okay. And then, okay, I think we turn it to Annette now. Unless there were any questions of that section.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood, but I thought that Justin said that after his discussion, we could ask some questions.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, that's only for the commission at this point in time, sorry.
Okay, so Annette, I think you're up.
Thank you. I want to, before I get to the alternatives and the director's recommendation, I want to acknowledge that the gentleman who had his hand up earlier, Greg Capillis, was listed in the RAC roster as representing Pacific Hydrogeology, and his hand was up to correct and clarify that he represented the Oregon Groundwater Association on the Rules Advisory Committee. So next slide, please. There are 4 alternatives listed in the staff report. The first one being adopt the final proposed rules as noticed. The second one being adopt the final proposed rules as modified by department following consideration of the public comments. For alternative 2, we'd also like to acknowledge that we intend to correct the typo. The third option is adopt final proposed rules as modified by the commission. And the fourth option is do not adopt the final proposed rules and request the department to further evaluate the issues. Go ahead, please, Justin. And we would, the director, on behalf of Director Gall, we'd like to recommend that you adopt the final proposed rules as modified by the department in consideration of public comment, along with the minor typo that was highlighted earlier.
For comment from the commission. Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. I think these are a good basis for moving forward. I still have some concerns about how effectively the off-ramp will work. And that's just because I think where we really need to get to is to have basin plans with groundwater components for all of our basins so that specificity can be accomplished, and also to break down the basins into sub-basins which may be needed to be treated differently, such as in the Harney Basin. So I think we're going to have to see how the first one of these requests plays out. I did have some concerns about whether there was a problem with the diffuse basin mitigation program, and Justin has indicated to us that he has looked at that and does not see that complication there.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Reeves.
So, I mean, I'm fully supportive of going forward with the rules. I'm having a brain freeze about what is the revision to potential for substantial interference from the notice version, its placement in the rules, or was there a substantive change?
Chair Quemps, Commissioner Reeves, there was not a substantive change to potential for substantial interference. Its placement was moved into the consideration of water is available. And I'm gonna look to Justin to confirm that's the answer.
I actually interpreted the question differently, but I guess, sorry, Commissioner Reeves, can you just say that one more time?
Well, I was just asking whether, you all described a change in the revision to potential for substantial interference from the notice version to what you are proposing for adoption after taking into account comments. And I was just asking whether is the change, the placement as Annette just described in the water is available definition, or was there something more substantive about it? I just couldn't, I had gone back through that proposed rule and I could not find the original version, so I just wanted to refresh.
Okay, so Chair Reeves, or excuse me, Chair Quemps and Commissioner Reeves, I do not believe that we made large or any substantive changes to the Division 9 rules from the noticed version, other than we tried to really clarify where the new definition or revised definition for potential for substantial interference applied to new applications for groundwater, which we've encompassed in Rule 40.0040, as opposed to really trying to separate off the second part of Division 9, which is the part that deals with regulation of existing rights in hydraulic connection with surface water. And we've kind of put those specifically in Rule 0050 and 0060. So the changes we made were things like updating the titles of those rules to really say this is allocation and this is regulation. And we put that in the preamble as well. Further, the thing that we moved was related to a finding of PSI. What happens when you have a PSI finding? And we moved that list of criteria for how can the hydraulically connected surface water support additional allocation from tributary sources, including groundwater, and we moved those from Division 8 definitions to Division 300 definitions. So
What was that last? Put them where did you say, Justin?
So
the last part you just said.
that
just the
last, so the last part I just said was we, in changing the definitions from previous versions, if you'll recall, we said, okay, we have this finding of potential for substantial interference that's described in Division 9. And then if we find the potential for substantial interference, what does that mean for allocation? And we had said, well, we want to look at, can surface water that's hydraulically connected to groundwater support additional allocation? We, in the noticed version, had those criteria encompassed within the Division 8 definition of substantial or undue interference. And in the public comment period, comments received were pointing out, hey, that term is used in other parts in statute and rule. And so another comment said, well, if you really want to separate out these considerations into or to be specifically relating to water is available, why not put them in the definition of water is available? And so that is the change from the noticed version that we've made.
And just to confirm what I think I understand, the content of new, Division 90060 is, from an existing rule that was numbered differently.
That's
And this
correct.
is an effort to make sure that it's clear that these rules don't govern, well, they do govern, but effectively make sure that there's a new way of looking at new allocations, but we're not changing how we deal with existing ground creeks.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Questions? Members, Commission ready for a motion?
Make a motion. And let's see, I move that the commission adopt final proposed rules as modified by the department following public comment. Attachment 9 with a minor typo in OAR 690-009-0050 correct. I second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Reeves, second by Commissioner Kahara. Take a vote, please. Commissioner Mall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kahara,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf. Yes. Commissioner Vice Chair Smitherman,
Yes.
Commissioner Reeves,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
I vote yes as well, passes unanimously. Thank you, Commission. Thank you, staff, for all the work, all the public comment, extending public comment during our last meeting. A great job along the thorough process, and I appreciate the work.
I also want to add to that, lauding the work that staff you have all done on this. I thought you did a really good job putting together this packet for the commission. You know, it was a lot of material and it was pretty easy to navigate as well, at least for me, if you fire paper. I don't have a split screen, I couldn't have done it on my computer. Anyway, just really great work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And before we move on to the next agenda item, I also just want to acknowledge and express my gratitude for Commissioner Reeves' time serving the department and serving on the commission. Unfortunately, I won't be there to thank you personally, but I understand this is your last commission meeting and I just wanted to acknowledge your contribution. So thank you.
Okay. Skip a break. Give our director report. For me.
So, Chair Quims, members of the commission, thank you for the kind words on our opening today. It's really an honor to serve the department in this role capacity. What I've got, I guess, are some opening comments. You do have, as agenda item C, the director's report. There's a number of updates in there. I won't touch on all of them. Kind of pick and choose, and then I'll try and elaborate on some to give you some more recent updates on a couple of items there. I guess just to get started, I spent the first couple of months in my new role settling in. I just spent a significant amount of time meeting with our external water partners and our management team internally. You know, part of my role here is really to get the agency performing at the highest level that we can function at with the resources available to us. It's been really interesting having these conversations, both internal and external. I will say that across the board, our water partners have offered up their assistance. They also are very anxious to help the department succeed. improve our processes and really be more forward-looking and modernize as we move into what I think is going to be a new generation of water management here in the state. So I look forward to continuing to work with them. Talking to our management team internally was also helpful in understanding really the importance for the agency to succeed. I need my staff to succeed. I've got to support them, provide them the resources that they need to do their jobs and to do it well. You know, that includes filling vacancies as efficiently as we can with the best candidates that we can bring on board. Continued education and training for our staff across the board. And I think really reaching out beyond the borders of the state to make sure that Oregon is aware of all the other tools that other states are using for water management. The West in its entirety is facing many of the same challenges that we are, and are struggling with the same challenges. So we'll be doing everything we can. We're trying to take a more active role with the Western States Water Council. Make sure we're sending staff or our executive team to attend those meetings. As well as, again, continued education and training in different trade shows and professional meetings to make sure we're bringing back the latest technological advances there. So excited to move forward with that. I've been coordinating closely with Director Colbert from Department of Fish and Wildlife and Director Sarah O'Brien, who's a new director at the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. The three of us are working to schedule meetings with our 9 federally recognized tribes here in Oregon and the Nez Perce tribe. We have our first meeting scheduled with the Klamath tribes mid-October down in the Klamath Basin there, and are working to try and find time with the other tribes as well. In conjunction with those meetings, we'll be reaching out to various water partners and other natural resource entities in those basins, as well as our staff, to spend some time over the course of a couple of 3 days in each of the locations there. So excited to get that process moving forward. Wanted to touch on a couple of things that I heard from meeting with the water partners. So these are our external groups, conservation groups, and water users around the state. Some key areas of concern I heard from them. You know, some would like to see in-stream protections beefed up. Some are frustrated by our complex system of reviewing and the large number of in-stream water right applications that are being protested around the state. Others are looking at our significant backlogs and long processing times for water rights and transfers. And so we have been working internally to one, shift some resources around to try and help water rights processing and transfers. I've asked a couple of positions get repurposed and get sent down there to speed up the processing time by adding some extra capacity there. So we'll be in the process of recruiting those 2 positions shortly. Staff have also been working to look at ways to streamline processes to try and speed up how we process these applications, but also looking at ways to improve protection. So conservation groups are very interested in making sure that ecological considerations like flows are protected when we're looking at transfers, and we're trying to evaluate ways that both streamlining the process, but also building in adequate protections for existing users and improvements for ecological considerations there as well. Let's see, moving over to the integrated water resources strategy. I think, as you're well aware, the Natural Resource Agency IWRS team had moved that through an initial public comment period. It was a new format. That process was wrapping up this spring, and then Governor Kotek asked for the process to get put on hold as several new agency director positions were being filled. So the Resources Department, OEB, and ODFW. That's all been completed. We've met with the Natural Resource Agency directors twice now. Our goal is to look at some of the actions within the current draft of the IWRS. There are 47 actions contained in it as drafted today. And find ways to prioritize those for agency-specific activities where we can bring forth some meaningful action for Oregon and Oregonians. I think if you may recall, last legislative session, the IWRS statute was updated. So the next draft of the Integrated Water Resources Strategy will be good for 8 years. But part of that statutory update was an inclusion where every 2 years, an updated work plan is going to be required. So we're trying to come up with a process by which we can look at key priorities for actions and get those worked into an initial draft of a work plan. And also refine, if needed, the structure of the IWRS to bring forth to the commission. There's a lot of pieces in play, so nothing is really nailed down yet, but it's our hope to get you a draft of the IWRS at probably the June commission meeting next year for adoption. There's a lot of things dependent upon that, so that's our initial goal right now, and the best we can come up with. What I can say is at the December commission meeting this year, we'll bring you a more detailed update. Things should be firmed up by then, and we should be more capable of providing better timelines and next steps for that process there. I think what I want to kind of go into now is just a real quick discussion, and then I'm interested in soliciting feedback from you all. The first part of the director's report really talked about a couple of things: the commission meeting structure. Some of you have voiced some thoughts on the frequency of meetings and other alternatives there, as well as content for meetings. The department's preference is that we continue to have 4 regular meetings each year. We'd like the length of those meetings to be determined by the agenda items. So some meetings will be shorter, others will be longer, depending on the necessary topics that we need to get through there. We're very open to the commissioners suggesting topics and appropriate amounts of time to have discussions around those. If there are topics you think we need to be looking at, I'm interested in hearing about that, or if you want specific report outs on agency activities, happy to accommodate those as well. We'd like to keep it relatively fluid. As some of you are aware, I think just once probably in the last 6 or 8 years, we've had to go through one emergency rule adoption to deal with some drought issues in the Klamath Basin several years ago. I think it was around stock water. You know, we'll go ahead and maintain that flexibility in the need that we do have an emergency situation where we need to get something together. I think I'll stop there and just see if there's any comments or questions around commission meetings and structure there.
Can I just talk loudly? Everyone hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Director Dahl. I know we've gone back and forth on this, and we've talked a lot of different ways of having our meetings, but I think for the sake of staff and the time that it takes for staff to put these meetings together, I think that keeping the regular 4 meetings per year is a good idea. With a potential extension of that meeting, depending on the topic, like you're saying. Because obviously there are some topics that take a little bit longer for us to go through. We want to have plenty of time to do that. And I think that's just the general idea behind all of this discussion, is that we want to have adequate time and feel like we've got all the information and we're making the best decision we possibly can. So with what you've proposed, I think that works for me. I like that idea. And obviously if there's a meeting where we don't have as much to talk about, then we don't have that much to talk about that time, so, and maybe we can do the Jeffos next time or something. But no, I think that having, 2 full days is appropriate and, I'll pass it on to someone else if they want to add on to that.
I like the idea of building in some policy discussions, as you suggest, not just to have the informational pieces from the department, but when there is slack in the agenda, perhaps have a list set aside of a couple things we might want to spend a little time just talking about in a less structured manner.
I didn't, speak up. I feel like what just happened with the groundwater rules was something that this commission set in motion in 2018. And I think that I don't want to think too highly of the power of the commission, but I do think it matters. And I do think that similarly with, I don't know what we want to call them, the gang of 4 otters or whatever the attorneys we want to call, who wrote to the governor in response to the request, but back in January, pointed out a number of very high level proposed changes to how we manage water. And whether it's those particular things, you heard me before say that I was surprised that there's no mention of land use in there, and I continue to repeat the need to integrate land use with these discussions. And to me, I would like to see our meetings do similar work where we're really tackling some of those bigger issues that are, yeah, it's a change in statute or in rule, but it's really a proposed change in culture. And the only way any of these changes is going to work is if behaviorally we as applicants and we as the department and we as professionals take a very different approach to what we consider to be the value of water and how it's used. And I feel like there are other things, for example, this question of transfers and the flexibility around transfers. And in some conversations with staff, it sounds like currently we have the ability to transfer water as proposed, which is the system itself is a little gummed up. And so those higher level strategic discussions is where I feel like our time could be well spent in service of the state. And I don't know, that's why in the past, we've talked about gathering again for a retreat or gathering around, in some ways we were doing it around IWRS. I'm very curious to hear what's going to come out in December. And I think part of me would like to hear the voice of those other natural resource agency heads in that conversation firsthand. But somehow I feel like if from the staff, we could get a list, some sort of prioritization of some of the bigger proposed changes. Like we did with the groundwater and say, okay, for the next 3 months, we're going to work on this. For the next 6 months, this is where it's going to be focused. So there's repetition across several meetings that I'd suggest. I think it would be productive and fun.
Thank you, Commissioner Wall. Others?
Question about the IWRS stuff. This is really not a suggestion, but what kind of is? Are you all talking about, in addition to prioritizing, either by a volunteer, naming an agency who has the lead on the actions? Because I don't think that happens now. Maybe it does in work plans that we haven't seen, but I feel like that's something that's missing that needs to be addressed.
Chair Quimps, Commissioner Reeves, it's a good question. I believe our vision, again, as we're working through it, is to have these actions somewhat broken out by different agencies. Some things that we are going to do are going to be more in our area of expertise than perhaps DEQ or ODFW. At the same time, I'm very much interested in trying to find some water challenges in Oregon where multiple agencies can all center on that and see if we can make some meaningful change there, get some things moving in the direction that it needs to get moving on. But I believe that our intent is to be more clear as to which agencies will be taking leads on specific activities. And not only that, but what are the measurable check-ins or progress or benchmarks that we're trying to get to? These work plans need to be due or updated every 2 years, but it's rare that we can solve water problems in 2 years and just get on to the next one. So I envision these things probably being on the order of 4 to 6 year long efforts. Some of them, depending on the nature, will actually require requests for funding and support from the legislature. And this is a little bit like timing is kind of key in my view with adoption of the next IWRS and having this first work plan ready to go. We need to start preparing policy option packages for the governor's office to review, and then ultimately the legislature, if the GRB contains them, timely in order to get them into the next session. And then that would be, if funding is granted, we'd be able to move on to some of these actions. We'll certainly do everything we can within the resources we have available to us, but there's limitations there.
Your comment about the work plans that you mentioned. So every 2 years, we would do a new work plan. I assume from what you just said too, that would go beyond those 2 years. Are we gonna be held to those 2 years of accomplishing X, Y, and Z in 2 years, or is it something that's gonna be a continuation and we're gonna move that to the next 2 year plan?
Chair
just
Quimps
depends on it.
and Commissioner Smitherman, yeah, I think we're gonna be leapfrogging along. We'll be charting progress. Some of these activities that we'll be looking to get movement on are gonna be multi-year efforts. Frankly, may never be done. You know, depending on where we're at, we may start in a basin and then expand from there. But I think it's gonna take the 2 year work plan, lay it out as best we can see it today. And in 2 years, we'll update that, report on progress, map out the next 2 to 4 to 6 years, and just keep leapfrogging like that.
Yeah, I think a good way to express that might be that if you have a 4 to 6 year effort, those 2 years are really milestones. So we're staying on track and mindful of that. We're not anticipating that we'll be complete then.
Maybe more of a progress.
And there may be additional actions that are slated to be taken as additional resources become available or other problems pop up.
Can I ask, in process, you mentioned 47, I think currently, the current draft 47 priority strategies. Has there been discussion among the natural resource heads about saying, okay, given just what you described, 2 year cycles and limited funding, et cetera, of cutting, of saying, of having a goal to really prioritize and say, we need to get this from 47 down to 10? First thing.
Chair Quimps, Commissioner Wall, we haven't discussed actually like removing any of the 47 actions. Some of our water partners out there actually would like, we did some combination, the original draft in 2012 and 2017, I think had 51 or 52. We've kind of condensed that down to 47. Some of our partners want to pull a few of those back so they're individually noted because they believe they're important. The current thought is not to try and bucket or consolidate any of those 47 actions, but from that list of 47 actions, which ones are important to move the dial on particular aspects of water management here in the state that our agency should focus on, or ODFW or ON, or in some combination thereof. And I talk about those 3 agencies. We're also working with DEQ, DLCD, on this. Those are the main ones. And then that will expand out to the other natural resource agencies.
I'd encourage that consideration. I do think it was part of the discussion that we had before, I think when we were in Harney County. About that very question, and I know that from a constituent standpoint, whether or not something's mentioned or not, there's a logic thread that takes it to, if it's not mentioned in the plan, you can't go to the legislature and you can't get the money, but you know, if we really are thinking that, as you said, we may not be able to get to some of these in 6 years, then I don't think they should necessarily be priorities, or we should at least give ourselves that grace to say, given those limitations, these 20, these 30, whatever it is, really needs to be called out. And then set to work on those other things that aren't mentioned in a different pathway. Because I do feel like, in my time on the commission, I've gotten a sense that staff are feeling overwhelmed by the breadth of priorities that are out there. And it's an understandable situation. The facts of the case in this are just like, we backed ourselves in the corner. So anyway, one voice from the commission that would ask the natural resource folks and the governor's office to consider saying no to some of those as priorities.
But Chair Quims, Commissioner Mall, I think the last thing I'll touch on, and Commissioner Mall, this gets to what you talked about being more strategic. We would like to try and hold some sort of a retreat or longer workshop in March. We'd originally thought we could do that in December, but I believe in order for us to be prepared to make good use of everyone's time, we want to have this IWRS process mature, get these prioritized actions on the table. Our intent is to do some additional outreach or workshops with the water partners here in the state on those priorities sometime in November. We should be able to report back to the commission in December then. But we've got a couple of big things going. One, of course, is the IWRS. A spin-off of that is going to be an update to our strategic plan. And so we really want to engage the commission on that. And I think that's going to lead to some higher level discussions about policy and the direction. But we want to be able to incorporate, again, the IWRS priorities that the agency sees as important for the next several years there. The strategic plan that we have is about a year out of date already. And so we're trying to get it set up where we can get it finalized by late next summer. We've just hired a new staff person that's going to be helping with that process. So is already starting to engage and review the materials that we have been able to work on so far. But again, I think what we're really hoping to do is have an extended commission meeting in March of 2025, add a day, maybe more to that, and get the strategic plan online and start getting to it. So happy to take any questions or thoughts on that as well.
I have a couple on the, I know it's early, but can you comment on the kind of the nature of the responsibility of the 3 new directors on the IWRS and what the scope of changes might be, and and then secondly, when you talk about the strategic plan, that's more inward looking department plan, correct? And I just want to encourage along the lines of prioritizing. You know, it's always easy to add work, but hopefully try to find places where you can, there's things you can eliminate. I'm sure your staff would appreciate that, just where you can gain efficiencies. I know it's a challenging task, but I think there's merit in thinking about that explicitly. So just those 2 points.
Chair Quims, with respect to the IWRS, you know, the Natural Resource Agency directors are really trying to take the current draft, which is a little over 200 pages, contains 47 actions. It's roughly broken down into a 25 or so page introductory portion that is really the background material, the statutory underpinnings of the various agencies, what authorizes us to do certain things, and what our mission is largely for the various agencies there. And then it contains some of the broader objectives with the 47 actions. And built into that are new one-page documents for each of these 47 actions. And when soliciting public comment on that, we got a wide breadth of comments and suggestions. Some folks don't like the new format. Some folks do. Any number of other detailed comments there. So we're trying to figure out the best way in an efficient way to take all of the work and information that's contained in the current draft and get it into a usable format. So the general thought now is to incorporate the comments that we've received that we believe are important to incorporate into that document. Share that information out as soon as we can, so folks are aware of that change. But our main focus really is trying to bin up or identify actions from that long list of 47 that we believe are the most important and are going to have the most meaningful impact on Oregon and Oregonians there. In conjunction with that, there's a lot of other information swirling. So the work I've done in meeting with water partners provided me with some insights as to what their sites are across the landscape specific to our agency. We have the letter from what we term the Four Friends letter from the 4 attorneys there to Governor Kotek that at a very high level laid out some ways to improve and think about better management of water here in Oregon. And trying to kind of honor all of those things to help us focus on what we believe is going to be the content in a 15 or 20 page work plan, supplement, something that will be laid on top of the current draft. But it's really going to be the focus and the driving force behind what we're going to be working on over the next few years. That will be the prioritization. We don't want to eliminate any of the 47, but we want to pull from those a few that we're going to focus our efforts in interview on. And that's the general concept right now. And I forgot the second.
Oh, the second part, which is when you're getting to the internal strategy, thinking, hopefully being able to find things you can eliminate, to lessen the workload on staff on some things and increase time on these other initiatives.
Chair Quimps, I appreciate that comment. We've worked hard the last few years trying to get better at recognizing our limitations internally and saying no to things that aren't part of our core mission or focus. And it's really challenging. I can't find anything in the agency that isn't important to some Oregonian or group of Oregonians out there that we can just say, well, this is a lower priority for us. Everything we do is important to some group, small or large, of the public or our customer base out there. And it's really challenging to find things to eliminate as an example, a whole program there. Of course, as we move into each legislative session, full session, we're always asked to look at a reductions list for the department. And that's always the question, do we just take a little bit from each of our sections or divisions? Or is there a whole program that we can eliminate to come up with a percentage that we need to do? And we just are never able to look at a particular program and say we can do away with this thing in its entirety. But we are very sensitive to that issue. And always are looking for ways to be more efficient and the extent that things are outdated and no longer needed, do away with them. And I'm hoping through some statutory updates, we'll be getting a better sense of what that may look like. We'll gain efficiencies, through time.
I understand the governor's office is working on a water package and the new water caucus has been meeting more actively. And I'm wondering if maybe at our December, January meeting, we might invite those folks to report to us on how things are going.
Chair Quince, Commissioner Lee, it's a good suggestion, and we can certainly work to get that scheduled into the meeting if those folks are available and willing.
I'm thinking about trying to make the a way to make the IWRS more strategic, basically. Even if you keep all those actions, maybe there's something that I'm looking at the Four Friends letter. They have a list of priorities, and whether you could have the priorities could be more broad, or the actions could be more broad. And the state could choose one or two of them to start with. Data in all its glory is an important aspect of managing all of the natural resources physically. And so, I don't know, I just feel like, even if you take a few of the actions now and prioritize them, some kind of more guiding statement about what the state wants to do across all the agencies that have anything to do with water. I think it would be, to me, it would be more effective and usable documents, but. And if I were doing it, I might start with this letter as a way to think about organizing, and there's other ways too, but it's one possibility.
Well, I think by their nature, if you look at broad issues, it's going to implicate more than one department and require integration, which is something I think a lot of us have wanted to see more out of the IWRS. Understanding that water resources are responsible for developing it and kind of holding it, but can't necessarily compel others to participate. So I think those broader issues can help with that integration.
Chair Quince and Commissioner Reeves, those are good comments, and I will, Commissioner Reeves, what you said reminded me that one of the goals of the natural resource directors is to come up with some overarching statements that are going to help the natural resource agency boards and commissions really understand where do they fit into the IWRS. And the natural resource agency directors, we're making sure they're much more engaged, I think, than we've been able to historically. It's very important to the governor's office that this isn't a water resources department document. This is a natural resources document for all of the agencies that deal with all the aspects of water across the state. And so we're getting great participation. Crystal is our project manager for the IWRS internally. She works very closely with a number of staff at the other natural resource agencies. She attends the deputy director's water core team regularly, provides updates and gets feedback from them. And then is working closely with our team and the natural resource directors in the governor's office in this new phase as well there. So I'm optimistic we're going to get there, but to do it in an elegant way that's really meaningful, it's taken some work and some time. We thought we could get it done in 3 meetings, and I don't think we're going to make it.
Just mechanics, so we're scheduled for the 13th and 14th of March currently, and if that's a meeting we're extending, it just means 2 full days those days, or are we considering the Wednesday or the Saturday morning or something like that, or have you all even considered that?
Chair Quince, Commissioner Wall, I think we'd probably be looking at another full day. So the Wednesday Depending on location, I suspect December will be meeting in Salem. March, yet to be determined. But it may necessitate travel on a Tuesday afternoon to get there, depending on where you're coming from anyways. And then start a meeting Wednesday morning would be my guess.
Thanks. Do we know what's coming? What else is coming in December? I would love to spend the entire December meeting on the IWRS and strategic plan. Maybe there's some other important action that needs to be taken then. Probably some budget and session related stuff. Huh?
I don't know if we ever. Chair Quims, commissioners, Commissioner Mull, you are testing my memory. For the record, Raquel Rancier, Deputy Director. If I'm recalling correctly, we may have a rulemaking come before you. That's the House Bill 3293, best practices in public engagement, something like that. You saw it's in the director's report. So depending on how that all goes, we are targeting that date. The other item I anticipate us talking with you all more about is the legislative session. And that is in part because it's going to be a big session, I think. So there's a lot of interest there. And while we don't have a lot of information we can share today, I think by December we will have probably a lot of information to share. So those are the two things that on the top are on my mind at the moment for December. And I would take a guess that there will be some discussions on the IWS. We just hired someone to work on the strategic plan. She will really be starting in October. She has technically started, but then she's going on vacation. So I would say October. And so I anticipate we'll start to get some momentum there. And that we may have some items for you all. But to have like a full retreat, I think maybe a little early. So those are just some of the items. As we noted in the director's report, though, if there are items that you all are interested in, feel free to mention it to us, shoot us an email, mention it to your chair here. And we are happy to evaluate those options. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate Commissioner Reeves' comments, whether it's the Four Friends letter or maybe between now and December, doing a little bit of that exercise and seeing if there is something that he brought back and say, yeah, we did that. And here are things that in their language were small, incremental, but meaningful steps to take in the near term or something. I think that it would be a nice entryway into then a March more robust discussion of the system. I would very much be in favor of that. I'm curious, are they formally still on retainer or anything? I mean, I guess one's joining the commission now, but is there any more formal back and forth with the governor's office, or are they just sort of sitting there waiting and going about their business?
Chair Quims and Commissioner, I believe that was really, I think they've been utilized more than anybody anticipated, I'll put it that way. So I don't think it was supposed to be this long of a ask for them. But what I will just say is based on some of the things I'm hearing in terms of the 2025 session, there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy. And so to the extent we have, I think it would be good for us to talk about the legislative session when we are able to fully understand what that will look like. Because I think a lot of those items that are in that letter are coming up in all these venues that we're talking about between the IWRS and our strategic plan, right? Our work plan, and of course, the 2025 session. So, and our rulemakings that we have coming up, so.
Could we get them to come to the December meeting? Would anybody else on the commission be interested in hearing from them directly? Sort of 12 months out from their, 11 months out from their memo. Again, recognizing that one will be a commissioner by that time.
Chair Quims and members of the commission, the Four Friends did present, I believe, both to a Senate and a House subcommittees earlier this year those were recorded. So if you haven't seen them, if you're interested in looking at them, we can get you the links.
Chair Clemson, Commission and Director, one item that may be a good item to talk about is actually rulemakings. Because we actually have probably told you all at some point in time that we have a rulemaking backlog. And so we give you all the short list, right, of the ones we're working on. There's actually a much longer list of rulemaking, so that might be something, depending on how the agenda is and the timing, that may be a good item to talk about, because it does relate to all these policies and what the commission's focused on. And of course, it's really what your authority is, right, is rulemaking. So. And Chair Clemson, as you all wrap up, I just want to remind you that we do have a public comment as well.
Anything else from the report?
Chair Quims, members of the commission, that's it for the director's report, unless you have any questions from any of the other topics I mentioned there.
Thank you. And so Raquel just kindly reminded me, we have a request for a public comment from Malaya Diaz on the agenda item B. Is that in person or is that virtual? Virtual.
This is Malia. I'm unmuted. In theory.
We can hear you.
Ask them if they can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Do they have questions for you?
I guess I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Let them know that Raquel asked you.
Yeah,
you were
well,
able to.
I received an email from Raquel saying that you may have some questions on the presentation that I provided you on my concepts for conjunctively managing our water resources, both surface water and groundwater. And so this is one opportunity for you to ask me any questions about that presentation be reviewed. I would still like to be able to give you that presentation at some point in time. I think that would be better than just looking at my slides.
Questions or comments?
My only question is whether or not you've provided this to any of the other natural resource agencies, for example, that are working on the IWRS that been shared or presented in other formats, forums?
Yes, I have. I have presented this presentation this spring at the Connect conference, where there were a lot of multi-agency people. I had standing room only in the room, and it had a lot of good response. And I've also presented it to the Yamhill County Soil and Water Conservation District and the Pudding River Watershed Council. I've presented it to a group of farmers in the Mount Angel area. And it looks like this fall, as people have more time, I'm going to be working with the Pudding River Watershed Council and the farmers in Mount Angel to see if we can start implementing part of this concept where we strategically start developing aquifer storage and recovery and artificial recharge in the Mount Angel area, doing it on a more watershed basis than trying to have individual farmers doing this, which was the path we started taking 17 or 16 years ago.
Great, thank you.
No other questions or comments? Thank you. There are no more questions or comments on your presentation, and we appreciate you taking the time to provide that and responding to questions today.
Thank you for asking and giving me the opportunity to respond.
Okay, so as far as adjustments to the agenda, I think the only thing we could move up, that Cal had mentioned to me could be the commissioner comments. We wanted to make some today and save time tomorrow. The other items will require other people to be in attendance that aren't here today, so. Minutes, the commission is good with that. Moved by Commissioner Reeves,
Second.
second by Vice Chair Smitherman. Commissioner Morrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaharu,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Smitherman,
Yes.
Commissioner Reeves,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Would you like to do public comments today or see the presentations tomorrow and wait until those are done to give comments tomorrow?
You mean commissioner comment?
Yes,
I prefer, I have one vote to wait.
I like that idea as well.
Wait, I'd like to.
Okay, so we can adjourn early today. Is there anything for any logistics or anything for the good of the order today or tomorrow morning that we need to share with the audience?
Chair Quims, members of the commission, just thanking you for all your efforts. I know some of you have traveled quite a ways for here. But also, you know, for your guidance, feedback, and support all the way through the groundwater allocation rulemaking. It was quite an effort. Really proud of our team internally here, and I think this is a big step in the right direction to modernize water management here in Oregon.
Thank you, Rick. We agree. We will adjourn.